And dad is not a noun, not at all.
My message to any dad, man, first off, know that, it is a hard job, but it's the greatest job in the world. I wouldn't trade it for anything. I wouldn't change anything about it. Everything you're doing from here on out, if it didn't have purpose before, now it has purpose. It's the most important thing you'll ever do. Just be a dad.
Welcome to another episode of That Is Not a Noun. My name is Ishmael, changing the narrative for men of color fatherhood, as well as changing the narrative on the things I care about. And today, this is part 3 of a 4-part series on AI ethics. And today, we're going to talk about education, because I think right now you see a lot of things going on, especially on the, in 2024, UK private school did a starter session of a teacherless AI classroom. And we're going to talk about that. And then also, how do we see AI playing a role in our education system? And I'm truly honored to have back my guest, Mr. Jackson and Mrs. Jackson, with me back again to have this conversation on AI ethics. Thank you, guys. Thank you for coming on.
All right. We're ready to go again. We appreciate it.
Also.
No. Thank you for coming on. You know the question I'm going to ask you always. How's your heart at this moment?
Oh, a little tired, but, well, beginning of the week, working with the kids, they kind of wear you out, but then you get fired up for the rest of the week. But it's all going good.
My heart is at peace.
That's what it's all about. That's what it's all about. Let's get into it, right? I sent you the article by Sky News. UK first teacherless AI classroom set to open up in London. A private school in London is opening the UK's first classroom taught by artificial intelligence. Instead of human teachers, they say that the technology allows for precise, bespoke learning, while critical argue AI teaching will lead to a soulless, bleak future. And I sent you guys the article. I will have the link in the description before who wants to read the article. But what are your thoughts of a school where, or even a trial period here in the States, where no teacher and everything is based on AI education?
Well, just from my experience from 3 decades, I'm totally against it. AI can be integrated into the current traditional academic structure, but just having an AI with no teacher guidance, no teacher experience, that is a dangerous path, because as we talked about before, that does not allow for somebody that has the experience of a teacher, the knowledge of a teacher, the knowledge of that particular subject matter, which can change throughout history or situation and circumstances, to be there and even to answer the students' questions that they may have, because we know AI does hallucinate. We go back to that again. So if the student asks a particular question, it's kind of like, AI may come up and say, well, I don't have the information, or make up something. Right. There are studies now that are showing that the more complex a question is, a lot of times AI will make up something and give the wrong information.
Right.
But having that lack of mature and seasoned educator in the class that can pivot and adapt and make the learning exciting, that would be a big mistake if they did not have the teacher in the class, particularly a certified teacher, because that means that you are a studier and learner of that particular area, whether it's math or history or science, that the students really need.
Yeah.
Ms. Jackson, I want to add to it too, is that the way they're doing it is that students will learn using a mixture of artificial intelligence platform on their computers and a virtual reality headset. So I want to just add that to the the conversation when it comes to what they're doing in the UK.
So we are AI and Metaverse educators. So we're all for teaching AI. We're all for using the headsets. Virtual education is literally, it's life changing for a lot of students. You know, I know that even as an adult, when I started using the headset and learning what you can do with the headsets, it's pretty amazing. It's pretty. I'm like, wow, I wish they had these when I was a kid, because I would have retained a lot more information. Because the idea of being completely immersed inside of an environment makes it a lot easier for your brain to remember information. And when it's presented in a certain way, you know, my favorite example is the first time I learned about it was a chemistry lesson, and we were on a spaceship, and they handed us a hydrogen atom, and then outside the window of the spaceship, they said, you know, look at what a plutonium atom looks like compared to a hydrogen atom. I'll never forget that. You know, it was the size of the planet Earth compared to the one I was holding in my hand. So on an atomic level, that's the difference between the two. So that meant a lot more to me than those numbers on a chart, right? That was like, whoa, that's amazing. But while we do AI education and metaverse education, I would never recommend it without a teacher being present. Never. The whole idea of having a teacher present, as my husband mentioned, is not just their years of education and certification and the fact that they can do that, but it's the hands-on aspect of having a human interaction with a person that can lead you and guide you. I think the danger of having AI as your sole tool, even if it's bespoke, because the beautiful thing about AI is that you can have a bespoke education. I'm not great at math. I'm really great at reading. AI can help me figure out those math problems that I'm struggling with and how to, you know, learn in a way that works for me, right? Which may be different than how it works for you or how it works for William. That's perfect. But to have that without the guidance of a teacher present, without having not just a teacher, but, you know, I know that sometimes that's also the argument for homeschooling. You know, that some people say, oh, we don't need the other students. They don't need the social interaction. You need some social interaction. So even if you're not doing it in your school environment, you need it outside of school. You do need to interact with other human beings. But one of the things, we went to a conference and we learned that the more you use AI, the lower your critical skills go down. Your thinking, your cognitive brain starts to decline. So we don't want to have our students solely relying on this tool when there are other tools that they need to be relying on. There's other, and again, going back to that hands-on encouragement aspect, a teacher actually talking to you. As my husband was talking, I was saying, yeah, you know, not only the education portion, but how many of us haven't changed the way we see the world based on a teacher's input on a subject matter, them sharing their viewpoint, you know, us taking that viewpoint and taking it home and said, you know, I had the social studies class and I talked to my teacher and this is what my teacher said. And your parents are like, oh, I agree or I don't agree. You know, the conversations that happen around that is something you would miss with AI. Honestly, that's my opinion.
And then you have to watch out for it. And the other thought is, who's programming the AI?
That part.
Yeah, I was like, okay, what data sets are they getting to program to AI to interact with the student? Also, the content area. Unfortunately, we're in an age here in Florida where you cannot talk about slavery. You can't use the word slavery. You can't use the several words related to that subject area. So if you're applying standards from other locations, how are you going to use certain words that now are not allowed?
Right.
You know, case in point, how do you argue the Gulf of Mexico and the Gulf of America? Who makes that choice of what language is going to be used for students now? As opposed to students that are already comfortable saying, "Oh, we have the Gulf of Mexico," but it's been changed by the federal government to the Gulf of America. How do you bring that conversation into a history lesson with AI when there's no teacher to guide that? And you look at all these structures in the place not even counting the cultural awareness, because you do have a lot of teachers that are culturally aware of their lessons that they're teaching, but it's like, is that going to be totally removed and so sanitized that it doesn't inspire and encourage, students to want to learn and beyond? And one of the fears I have, even though we've been doing this for quite a while, you make it so sanitized that you're only doing the lessons the way it's prescribed with AI. You're learning that content, but you're not motivated to learn more. It's like, okay, AI taught me this. I understand it. I'm going to take an assessment. I passed the assessment. Okay, but are you motivated to do more? But also, are you motivated? And we tell our students all the time, whether it's the school I'm at or whether we're co-teaching, all information should have relevancy for you in having a conversation with somebody outside of the school. And you need to be able to communicate with people effectively, and that goes back to the human engagement and connection. Can you take this information in your brain and go somewhere and talk to somebody? If you're traveling with your family and somebody asks you a question like, "Where are you from?" "Oh, we're from Florida." "Oh, how is Florida? What's the capital of Florida? How's our kids have to have those abilities to have conversations like that. And does AI inspire something like that? And at this point, in my opinion, it doesn't.
No, and I think it goes back to what the article said is that one of the teacher said is when you add this technology and computer screen,
Mhm.
you dehumanize education, that the learning process
Right.
for a child or anyone in their development of learning,
Hmm.
because this is where they're getting this information from. They're
Right.
not getting it from a living, breathing person, whether you disagree with what they're saying or
Mhm.
whether or not. But this is what you're getting from this person.
Right.
This is what you're getting from it, from something that was created by somebody.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? So
Exactly.
that's a huge disconnect. And then also, what do you think? Do you think COVID kind of accelerated this idea of AI in the classroom?
Oh,
With AI,
right.
with COVID, um, schools were locked down, and so kids were kind of isolated with their laptop or their iPad. So they kind of not kind of like a lot of kids, especially in the States, were
Right.
distant from that interaction.
Oh yeah, that's true, because we were talking about when the school year started, how emotionally the kindergartners and first graders were disconnected and could not adjust to the different changes that were going on in the classroom, and just the slightest thing would sometimes set some of them off into an emotional tangent. Like, for instance, like having a lesson with STEAM class, and they're either given worksheets to do or coloring sheets, and the time runs out in class, and you're sharing with them, okay, we can't finish today, we'll finish tomorrow. It's quite a few kids that don't understand that concept, that we have to stop now and we'll start back again the next day, because everything was just so constantly going. They don't understand that. Or when you're talking to them about their work, and there's more students now, when you're doing work, they're like, "Do you like my work? How does it look? What do you think about it?" So you start with one, but then it's like it's a snowball effect. It seems like most, if not all, the kids, "How does my work look? Did I do it right? What do you think? Do you like it?" And it goes back to um, that emotional attachment to what they're doing, that they're trying to receive. I think the word's verification. I know there's another word about how good a job they are doing. But on the flip side, you have to be careful in how you, I don't say criticize, but how you judge it. Because, what if the work isn't up to what you believe as a teacher that you're capable of? And there have been cases where students have told, "Well, I know you can do better. This is pretty good, but it's not as good as you could do it." And they fly off the handle. "Oh, if you don't like it, this is terrible." And they break down and start crying.
Yeah.
And have, but you try to understand the dynamics of where they came from, the environment,
Right.
to where they are now in a more structured environment with the teacher or teachers that try to be understanding and communicate with them, you won't get that through an AI.
Right.
You won't get anything related to an AI. And like we were talking about before, and Aida laughs at me when I tell a story about Roy G. Biv learning about the colors of the rainbow. So I kind of enhanced that with when I was in elementary school, we would walk back and forth to school, but we had to be really careful because, when I went to elementary school, there were dinosaurs around. So, the kids are like looking like, what? You're that old? I'm like, yeah, you have to be careful. Then I make up this story about, one of the kids being snatched by a pterodactyl and all that. And they just be like, what? And some kids are like, no, that's not true. You're not that old. And I'm like, yes, I just don't age very well. But I age very well. But just having those interactions to make them laugh and make it humorous to get their attention. AI doesn't have the capability to do that. And that's again, one of the downfalls, because in the article that you mentioned, they will have not teachers, but assistants in the classroom, but those assistants aren't referred to as teachers. They're there to assist and help the AI, not necessarily help the student. Right. So there may be an emotional attachment, but as it said in the article, they're trained not to have that kind of relationship with the student, because now they're being told, no, you can't, be friends with them. You can't have an attachment with them.
Well, they're also being told not to assist them. And so imagine you're being told, and this is something I think even for adults that we need to keep in mind. Imagine you're being told that you need to interact with this particular material, and someone else is in the room and absolutely does not interact with that material. Right. You're going to begin to question, why do I have to do this? Mm-hmm. If this person is here and now I have to interact with this, but they don't, why should I be interested in this? And so one of the things in the conference that we were at, they was talking about the relationship learning connection, that teacher-child relationship is one of the greatest predictors of academic success. So we're kind of eliminating that. We're taking the teacher out of this altogether. So what does that mean? Because we're playing around with these students' futures by deciding that we're going to just use AI and not use teachers, right? Pro-social behavior in kindergarten is also one of the greatest predictors of later academic success. Having a friend in kindergarten is one of the greater predictors of later academic motivation, right? So we're not just talking about learning, we're also motivation to learn. So remember, if your teacher is teaching you, they are engaged with the material. Right. You are engaged with the material. So we as a collective whole are engaged with this material. You're telling me it's important because you're teaching me this material. It must be important. And it's important enough that you spend years of your life learning the material so that you can teach me. Otherwise, we have someone here who doesn't even know the material. It might be, maybe I'm learning something in AI and I ask the present assistant and they don't have any clue. So if the AI can't explain it to me, they can't help me. That's going to make me question, why am I learning this? It's not even important to this adult in the room. So why are they forcing me to do this? And the number of strong relationships that we have throughout our school years drive our greater academic motivation and skills. So the more people we interact with, whether it be the teachers or the administrators or the other students, that's going to be the thing that's going to motivate us for the future, to want to learn more. When you went to college, I'm sure, when I went to college, part of it was because my friends were going to college. Yeah. My teachers were college educated educators. So it was like, wow, I love what you're doing. I want to do what you're doing. I'm going to go to college too. Well, this is the college I went to. Do you understand this? These interactions are more than just rote memorization, which is where AI is basically going to take us. Rote memorization, rote learning. We're just going to be producing over and over. And what we've learned here in the United States, as we discussed earlier, is that this idea of constant production only leads to more stress, more anxiety, more depression. We don't know that there's more to life than just producing on a constant basis. And yet what we're going to do by doing this with these students is, this is what you're going to do. Produce, produce, produce. And that to me is scary. As a parent, I absolutely, as a parent and a teacher, I absolutely don't agree with AI being your sole educator.
And, and as I even say, as a parent and a grandparent, having just outside the classroom itself with children, you cannot help but build a relationship with your students to aid them and help them. And we still have, when we're going out to different places, adults or teens that have attended a class or a class we taught someplace or a workshop come up and tell us, I enjoyed your workshop, I enjoyed the class. So you can see the excitement in their face and their eyes sparkle and they smile.
Mm-hmm.
But with AI, you don't have that attachment. You don't have anything related to that. So you're going to get, who knows what you're going to get.
Right.
But I do caution, and I used to talk about this before. There's in Star Trek, there's an episode, and I bring this up every once in a while too, to make a long story short, that I call it embellish. Captain Kirk is walking through the starship. He goes into a room, and it's a classroom. There's a lady walking around, and all she's doing is monitoring the kids. There's no feedback, there's no emotion. And the kids there are looking at screens that are computers. Right. Well, during the 70s, I believe that's when the episode came out. And I was watching with my mom, that the kids weren't interacting with anybody. They were in their cubicles, looking at a computer screen. And all Captain Kirk said was, how are the students doing with their lessons? And all she said was, they're doing well. Mm-hmm. And you reflect back on something like that, and it's like, they're doing well, but like we're talking about, what are they getting out of it that can help them relate to each other as opposed to a lesson on a computer screen? And that's very scary, and it's very dangerous because you lack that, like we've been saying, emotional connection and ability to form bonds of friendship and build relationships, because that's where it starts. Kindergarten, first and second grade, like we were talking about, you develop your friends kind of influence your behavior patterns, but then you get other friends and you know how to treat them. You get other friends and you learn how to trust them. But we teach each other along the way the human element of our behavior. So here we have now an inhuman machine that relies on data that's created by humans, that's programmed by humans, but where's the humanitarian connection to keep us, bonded together and collaborating together?
And I just want to add an element to it too. Is like, where is the? I know this is the trust a trial period, what they're doing right now. Mm-hmm. What is the level of ethics when it comes to consuming all the information on the students, right?
Right.
Again, you have this AI. They're collecting, even though they're the kids, they're getting all this information, but at the same time, they're collecting this data on these kids, right? Mm-hmm. Whether it's emotional information, information on their parents and things like that. Like, what are you doing with that information?
Right.
So I want to add that to the conversation too. It's like that part of it. It's like, what are the schools doing with that information about those kids?
Right. And that's always been a question, but how do I say this? You kind of see it in the assessments because they're trying to measure their reading growth and their math growth, and how in the future, through elementary school, middle school, high school, and potentially college, how they're going to advance and how they're going to be successful. But that comes from a structured curriculum where you have state standards, you have benchmarks, you have learning objectives built in to show what you want the students to learn, what they should be capable of growing into and their growth potential. And then your assessments are based on your objectives and benchmarks as well. So you can see that all those metrics built into place are supposed to work together. But where do you see that in a AI? Like you said, but when it gets that data, what is built in to say, okay, they're falling behind. How do we address this? Or do they even address the cultural differences of the students through that AI? And sometimes we see AI is biased, it's stereotyping, and on a larger scale, sometimes it is. I'm gonna just say it is racist against different cultures, different colors. So you have all of these elements. That means you have to monitor it and what's the word? Address the ethics, like we're talking about, into it to make sure that it doesn't have the biases. But that's even scary too, because
yeah. Well, I do agree there are definitely biases, but as far as collecting information, the truth is these schools have been doing this with our students for years anyway. I mean, we just have no idea how much they're collecting, especially, when it comes to the testing. I mean, you just think about it. You didn't spend I don't know your age. I can say for myself and my husband, we didn't spend all of our time in school testing. All of our time in school was not spent preparing for another state test. Now, did we have state testing? Absolutely. But we didn't spend all of our time preparing for a state test. That's something that's really more now. As a matter of fact, my teenagers, well, they're not teenagers now. They were teenagers years ago when they were in high school. I remember reading an article about here in Florida, they were about to get a test, and that the students had to sign off that they would not speak with their parents about the test that they were taking. And I was like, how can they even do that? And I was like, that's not true. And then I asked my students, and they were like, oh yeah, they made us sign a paper in school that we wouldn't talk to you about the test. And I'm like, what? They made you do what? And how is that even legal? Well, I found out it's legal because legally, when your students are in school, the school is considered their guardian. So they can legally sign a paper in front of someone who the school is represented by the school, even without you being present. So imagine now, take that to the next level with AI. What else can be put out there? What else can be taught? What else can they do? And then have them sign this paper that they won't talk to the parents about what they're being taught. I mean, because the truth is, we don't know. The truth is, that's one of the things as parents, grandparents, teachers, that we're always telling parents, get involved, stay involved. Right. Get involved, stay involved. Yeah. Because you want to know what's happening. You want to know what's happening at the school. You want to know what's happening, state level, federal level, whatever it may be. But really, more importantly, get involved, stay involved at home. Because if they're going to this is a trial run, but I can assure you it's a trial run that they're hoping will be successful so they can start implementing. And if they can start rolling this out, what does that mean for teachers and work? What does that mean not only for teachers and work? There's another thing that we learned at the conference. It's called the cognitive decline paradox. It's called the Flynn effect reversal. And what they're learning, that for the first time in decades, cognitive intelligence scores are declining in developed countries. Instead of going up, they're going down. Isn't that ironic with all the technology we have, with all the things we have at our disposal? Especially here in Americas, I cannot speak for other countries, but I can say definitely here in the Americas, if you're fairly well off, you have a computer, you have a cell phone, you have a tablet, what I mean? Like, you have more ways to plug in and connect to the world and connect to information than ever before. And yet what they're finding is that our cognitive scores are declining. They're finding that the more you use AI, the less your critical thinking scores, your critical thinking will grow. Like, you really mess with yourself by using AI as your sole tool. If you make AI the one that thinks for you, you slowly start to not think for yourself. So what is that in the long run? If we start with our children very young, what does that mean for them when they become adults? What does that mean? Most of us can tell, especially if you've gone any level of education, even if you haven't gone very high, most of us can tell a friend, a family member of that one teacher that made a difference in their life. that one teacher that gave them that high five, that one teacher that introduced them to a subject matter they knew nothing about. For me, it was apartheid. I had to do in middle school. I had to do a report, and we all had to pick a paper, and mine was on apartheid. And I was like, I don't even know what that is. He was like, that's the point. You don't know what that is. Go find out. And I was blown away. I could not believe in this day and age, in that time that we were still dealing with, this level of racism. I didn't believe it. I didn't know. I had never experienced that. And then here I am. Look at this. I grew up in New York, and in New York City, we're such a melting pot. It was like, and not to say that racism didn't happen, but it wasn't like segregation racism. It wasn't like, well, I can't even say that either. I was bussed into a quote unquote white neighborhood when I was in middle school. But it was in middle school where I learned about this subject, and I was like, okay, well, let me look it up. But it always stayed with me. William can tell you about his experience with a teacher, but also think about the teacher that high-fived you for the first time. You were struggling with a thing, and they were like, yeah, gave you that pat on the back, like, man, look, you did it. You see, that encouragement from another human being means more and has more weight than an AI flashing whatever is going to flash, or whatever it's going to do, like, yay, it just doesn't mean the same. It just doesn't come across the same.
Some of my fondest memories, even when I taught middle school for 2 years, was the interaction with the students. And it's just like, like I was saying, the high fives or even the hugs. They run up to you and you turn sideways, you give them a sideways hug, because they need that interaction.
Right.
How do you stop a student from running up to you and grabbing your hand and holding your hand and squeezing your hand, saying, they appreciate, the lesson. It was cool. It was funny. It was gross. I learned something. It was great. But how do you not be receptive to that? And then the students that start off the school year, and we have students now that are totally quiet, nonverbal at the beginning of the year, but now we're going into October. They're starting to talk, and they're starting to share their feelings because we're interacting with them and showing them that you can do this work. Is you're smart, you're intelligent, you're creative, but AI does not have that ability to do that. I mean, it may have flashing lights, it may have, characters like some of the programs do, but at the end of the day, that's a program. They'll remember the program and maybe the little bit of fun, but they won't have that human interaction that we all need.
And that lasting impression. Because I can tell you from being married to a man who's been in education for 30 years, that we go places, Ishmael, let me tell you, we'll be sitting there just minding our business. And one time we went somewhere and this man was literally staring at him from across the room. And he said, he was telling me later on, he's like, he was thinking like, do I have to move? Do I have to come between you? Like, why is the guy staring at us? And it turned out it was one of his former students in his college class. Wow. And he said his class literally changed the trajectory of his life.
Wow.
He said, I just wanted to come over and let you know that what you taught me in that college class, he said, it changed the way I looked at my life, and I became an entrepreneur, and now I feed my family off of what you've taught me. Wow. We've been in other places. We went I think it was like our second date. There was a little boy behind us, and he was in front of us. He was in front of us, and he turned around and noticed it was him. And he could not stop turning around. He was so excited to be near his teacher. His mom could tell him, turn around. And he was like, that's Mr. Jackson. Wow. He was so excited. AI is just not going to get people motivated and excited about education the way a human being will. It just won't happen.
No, and I agree too. I think the one thing is too, is like there has to be a balancing act. Like,
yes,
you utilize AI, but don't heavily depend on it. And I think where we're going right now as a society, we heavily have this idea that we're going to be depending on this technology. Going back to, with Trump, signing an executive order, integrating AI into K to 12.
Well,
So again, this is an executive order. So I want to kind of put like a disclaimer. It's just the executive order is not the land of the law. Any president can sign an executive order,
right.
but when it comes to education, it depends on the state.
Mhm.
States define what requirements when it comes to what is taught in their state.
Right.
But on a federal level, you can kind of set up guidelines. So in the ideal world where, let's say, AI becomes this dependent model,
Mhm.
how would that look as the Board of Education implement like regulations and guidelines when it comes to the utilization of AI? How would that look like to you guys?
Wow, that would be extremely hard because one, you look at the dismantling of the Board of Education on the governmental side in the first place, because that component helps filter out down information and resources to on the state level. Hey, this may be standards that you might consider. These are probably guidelines you might use. This university is doing research from K to 12 and AI. So you have to make those connections first, and find educators that are or have been consistently using AI as a teaching model or as a platform. Well, if you don't have consistent training or workshop related to that, that's going to be a challenging issue because the majority of the people now have taught themselves, or a lot of the programs now that are out are dealing with AI in business, not necessarily AI in education. Here in Jacksonville, there are quite a few teachers that are knowledgeable, but we're still denying access to AI tools and platforms in Duval County Public Schools because there aren't consistent or established state standards and guidelines for that yet. Now, they're working on it, but still you have to train the trainers that are going to train teachers and how to consistently use it in the classroom and to monitor student progress. So, as everybody knows, education is usually 2 to 3, if not 4 years behind everybody else because of this process.
Right.
So we're still looking at several years before they actually have a curriculum. Now, if they rush the curriculum, that still will be an issue because you're talking about kindergarten to 12th grade, and segmenting those areas to where like, okay, what AI are we going to use? What curriculum standards? What benchmarks? Are we going to get books for this, or how are we going to, train the teachers to look out for learning levels? And so it's a whole lot, like you're saying, that goes along with it, because the federal government can say, yeah, we want you to do this, but it's starting this train down the track. You got to get all the passengers in and all that together.
Right. I mean, the other thing we don't talk about is the elephant in the room, which is there are a lot of students who don't have access.
Still,
Right.
Yeah.
So we have a lot of students that don't even have access to computers or even internet access. That was clear when COVID happened, and they were more than happy to fill in those gaps. But that's a long time ago.
Yeah.
We're 5 years out, going on 6 years out since COVID, and they're not doing that anymore. So we have a lot of students that still don't have access.
Right.
So unless they're in school, they really won't have access and be able to use this
Right.
tool and as a learning tool further. We did speak with someone who is on the state level, is a part of a task force for the state. And she said that one of the issues that they're having here is that, what you were talking about earlier, data.
Right.
How do we keep the children's data safe? If we're going to use it, how do we keep their information from going into some worldwide network? So how do we keep them, and what protocols can we put in? So we definitely need to have conversations around that, and what kind of the guardrails can we have, not just for what can happen, because we know AI can hallucinate, and we know that AI has a tendency to go off into some tangent, which we've seen that, may not be safe for children. So we need to consider those things. So for me, when it comes to how do we integrate it, absolutely, AI can help students that need to know
Mhm.
what, need a different type of learning. We have a lot of neurodivergent students who don't learn like other students. AI can actually help with that. Um, but absolutely, we would keep the teachers involved on every level in every subject matter. Those teachers that teach that subject will help the AI to help that student and create the curriculum, or at least modify it for the student to help them learn, because we don't have enough aides to help
Right.
every student. We don't have enough teachers' assistants to come in and help with those students. William was telling me how they're integrating neurodivergent students that are further along on the spectrum. So, say someone who has, behavioral issues, or are more autistic than another student,
Right.
integrating them into the standard classroom. Well, the teachers don't always have the capacity to help all of those students. AI can help with that.
No. Definitely. And then also what I worry about too, because with this technology, it constantly step on its own foot a lot of time.
Right, all the
There's
time.
always an update system.
Yes.
Where we at now with ChatGPT? We had 5 or whatever. Then there's gonna be another 6,
Of course.
yeah, 7. So who will keep update of this training? Like, oh yeah, this version that's out now is gonna be totally different, and now you got to teach the
Right.
people who
Right.
already know
Absolutely.
the new system. And it's
Exactly.
like something that comes out every month. It's um almost like God rest his soul, Prince. You know how Prince used to come out with an album all the
Right.
time.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
It's the same thing with this technology. There's always
Mhm.
going to be something new. So
Right.
the system in place, or you're going to put in place that's going to educate the people who's supposed to be the people to educate the teachers. Like, oh, this is the new system out.
Right.
This is what you have to learn now. Like, people don't have time to do that.
Right.
Right. But I mean, and understand something. First of all, we just did a training, and in our training we had at least 25 student teachers, not students. We were training teachers on how to use AI. And we asked in the very beginning, how many of you are actually using AI? And of the 25 teachers present, only 7 raised their hand,
Right.
which means the majority of the teachers aren't even using the technology. So to assume that the teachers know what it is and know how to use it and are all set and ready to go is a wrong assumption, because we learned quickly, like, oh wow, we're really teaching all of you from the beginning.
Right.
And then we had some teachers who were kind of using it, as a middle ground kind of thing. But then one teacher who excelled all the other teachers, she was teaching us some things on what we can do with it, going forward. And that's the whole point, is that you do need to have this ongoing training.
Right.
You need that. You're going to, and you're also going to have to get past people's reluctance. Everyone that is not excited to use AI. We know this as educators. We know this as, community leaders and going out and teaching about AI. There are a lot of, especially on a spiritual level, a lot of people who are, churchgoers who are like, I absolutely won't use it at all. So we have teachers who on a spiritual level may not use it, ethical reasons may not use it. I mean, we have a list of reasons why people won't use the technology. The environmental impact, some people say I'll never use it because of its environmental impact. So you're going to have to get past a lot of biases if this is something that you're going to implement here. And you can force them. You're a teacher, you have to. And if you don't, because they did that before with COVID, right? Either you do this or you get fired, right?
Yeah.
Sure, we can do that. But then how does that affect the learning environment?
Yeah.
That I'm being forced to use a tool I don't want to use.
And then that tool, and as we know, the more you use it, the more it learns about you. So not only are you teaching this to students, but that AI is learning about that teacher, and that teacher may not want AI to learn about their teaching style, their thought processes, their data as well. Because as educators, we just don't rely on just one source. We rely on multiple sources to address all the learning, the learning modalities of the students in the class. So we have to be prepared for that. So if you're searching for, literacy or spelling or vocabulary words or whatever, you're putting in the parameters of what you're looking for. It's giving you that information. But then you go back and say, well, what if I have a student that's a slow reader? Or what if I have a student that's dyslexic? Or what if I have a student that's has an IEP, individual educational plan? So you're looking at all those elements and you're putting that information out there. It's giving you resources and assistance back, but it's still collecting your data with that. And, like Aida was saying, that's a concern there. Even, and I'll give you a perfect example. I was using ChatGPT a couple of days ago because I was looking for vocabulary words for my second and third grade students relating to STEM and STEAM. And it actually came up and said that, and I could click a button, would you like this data to be archived or used as a resource for, I think it said Open AI. So I was like, no, I don't want that, because now you're going to monitor what I'm looking for, the information I'm requesting. And it may seem beneficial, but do I really want that on my computer? That access. And I was like, no.
And not to mention that curriculum is IP.
Yeah.
It is intellectual property. And if I create a curriculum, it's mine. I may not necessarily want it out there for everyone. Now I might, or I may not, but I'm just saying that for a lot of people, they work very hard to create their curriculum. Listen, I have 4 courses, they're 4 hours each. You know how long it took me to create those courses? You know how many hours of my time and energy? And now you want me to plug it into a computer model so the computer model could send it around the world and I get nothing in return? Like, I don't know if I'm down for that.
No. And I think you're on point with that, is that anything you put in that space is that they're going to take and grab and utilize it and package it. And unfortunately, the reality is that you're the source of the idea.
Right.
And now someone else is going to benefit from it because you put it into that. You fed into that system.
Right. Right. And that's what I mean. Like, that we need to be aware of that, especially when we start going into a university level. But even on the K through 12, there are my husband has created lots of curriculum. He may or may not, some of us, there's times when I'm like, I don't care. We speak around the world, people have seen us things, and I'm sure people have collected information. That's great. But in the end, do you really want to put your entire curriculum out there? You just want to throw it in there and it goes,
No, definitely, because it goes back to my last thing. It's like we have universities that's using AI right now to see professors seeing if their students, like, they're giving them the green light. Yeah, go ahead, use it for a report. We also have it too, and we can tell whether you use it or not. And if you use it, you're gonna fail. So it's like catch-22.
Right. It is a catch-22. And also, AI is not a good writer. It's not a good writer. So even when we're teaching students, we're like, don't use it to write. First of all, we'll know you're using it because it writes the same way. You can tell, you can read AI writing. You're like, oh wow, yeah. And the issue is, though, and here is an issue, that AI is trained on how to write properly. Period. It writes properly. It writes proper English. So a student, because this actually has happened to several students who know how to write well, who write properly, just maybe not very interesting, quote unquote, I guess that's if you want to call it that way, have been accused of using AI when they did not. They just know their grammar. They know they know how to use the English language, and they know how to write in accordance to proper English. And they've been accused of using the tool when they did not use the tool. So there isn't, even when you put it through the there's this new thing, like it could tell if it's AI or not. And it said, oh, it is, but it wasn't, right? So it's not effective. It's still not effective. So you can't tell me it's okay for me to use it to create the curriculum, but then you can't tell me, then you're going to tell the student it's not okay for them to use it.
Right.
We need to find something in the middle.
Yeah.
So, I tell students, use AI to help organize your thoughts.
Right.
Don't use it to write for you. But if you have trouble organizing the order, So you tell, this is the idea, this is what I'm putting, these are all the elements that I want. Help me to organize it so that I can write a proper novel, or I could write a proper essay.
Right.
That's one thing. But to use it to write for you and to think for you, then that's something else. And again, going back to my earlier comment, when we continually do that, we are lessening our ability to think critically. And we don't want to do that.
And that's the one thing I worry about with this technology, is that it kind of limits our critical thinking skills, our problem solving skills, because we look for outsources to help us with that. And so that's the one thing I worry about that. But this has been a great conversation. But before we end it, what do you think would be like the perfect balance act? When I know Miss Jackson talked about it a little bit, but what would be the perfect balance act of utilizing AI in education?
I go back to what I've been saying since 2020. You should have two components of professional development, one for teachers and one for students, because it doesn't make any sense that, let me rephrase that. There becomes a conflict when you're teaching just the teachers how to use AI and not the students, because they both need professional development. Because if you look at the instructional component, like what AI platform are you going to use? How are you going to create a curriculum for the teachers to learn to use it to teach the students? But within that curriculum, what are you going to teach the students to do that's beneficial for them, for their future growth and development? Because it's like, again, it's going to be different from K to 5, 6 to 8, 9 to 12. So you're going to have to come up with all these different ways to teach students, to teach the teachers. Then they're going to have to teach the students. But the technology changes so much, you're really going to need, and I'll say even with middle school and high school, you're going to have specific professional development for students in middle school and high school, because their ideas are going to be, what do I want to do in the future and how can I apply this technology? Not based on, okay, the teacher's going to teach you about all the facets of AI and give you a test at the end of 9 weeks and see if you pass or fail it. That doesn't accomplish anything, because still, you're teaching to a test, not how to effectively take the AI and use it to build you into a business owner, an entrepreneur, an engineer, a mathematician, whatever that student wants to be. So I always, that's my take on it. You still have to have professional development for kids, and also never forget the cultural background of the students either, because we're seeing more, and just to be honest, Black, Hispanic, and other cultures, again, this digital divide is expanding, because they don't have exposure. Like I used to say, they don't have the access to get them to effectively use AI in the infrastructure. So you still got to contend with that. But
Definitely. Miss Jackson, final thought?
Yeah, I mean, no, I absolutely agree with everything he just said. But I will also say that, when we work together, especially when we're working with young students, we call ourselves the Extreme Team. And that's, for STEAMM with science, technology, reading. So I'm the A in that. As an artist, I say that we need to bring back more creative opportunities for students in the classroom. So if we're going to bring in all this technology, then we need to counterbalance that. We need to give them more creative outlets. We need to give them more opportunities, because creativity helps with critical thinking.
right.
And AI does not allow for creative thinking if we're going to constantly use it as the crutch in what we're doing. Because once students figure out what they can do with this thing, I mean, that's it. So you need to have professional development, because the truth is, and this is something that we do tell parents, you need to have entrepreneurial skills going into the future.
Yeah.
Even if you plan to get a job, you need to think like an entrepreneur, because when that job is no longer available because AI has now taken over, now you need to figure out what you're going to do next. You need to be in a constant state of being able to pivot without breaking down And that's entrepreneurial skills. An entrepreneur knows like this company is no longer viable, it's no longer working, time to shut it down, time to sell it, time to do whatever. We need to pivot, we need to revamp it, we need to do something new. That's the critical thinking skills students are going to need moving forward, because they are learning things now that in 10 years will not exist. So what happens when they spend all these years trying to learn to grow up to be something that now AI is doing efficiently, that those jobs are no longer available. What will you do next?
Yeah. And
Oh,
okay, Mr. Jackson.
and that brings me back to when we were all working with the Clever Minds STEAMM Academy. And even just in this setting like this, introducing the kids in Nigeria about AI and explaining to them what AI was, but then asking them what AI could be used for. So it was really interesting and heartfelt that all of the kids wanted to use AI to be either doctors or attorneys or engineers or something that helps them and their families to grow and be better.
They wanted to come back to
They
the
wanted to
community.
come back to the community.
So that they can fix and help
Right.
the community
Yeah.
grow. That was beautiful.
And not having real access to it, but still it's important to have conversations and not to put down our educational model, but when you ask students here in the States, what would you use AI for? There's a delay because still in their mind, they're still processing, well, what is AI and how is it beneficial to me and what I'm doing, or even to my family? So that's important, to see the difference and understand, yes, we need to be, engaged in the communities. Again, the word churches and ministries, this is what AI can do to help you, but you have to have an awareness of the different types and the models and what's out there and available.
No, definitely. And I thank you guys for staying the course, because right now, I know that word you use, pivoting, you see across the country that you see a lot of teachers pivoting to a new direction. So I appreciate and I understand what they're going through, because right now we're in a environment where teachers are so disrespected.
Mm-hmm.
They're paid less. They're taking money out of their own pockets.
Mm-hmm.
Even though it's a tax write-off, but still, I don't think teachers can come out of their pockets for their students.
I don't think it is anymore.
It is no.
It's not anymore. Mm-hmm.
Nope.
So, for you guys to stay the course, I truly appreciate what you guys do on an everyday basis, because some people are not built for what you guys do. People don't realize, teaching is not a profitable job.
Yeah.
But also, the most important thing about teaching is that you do it because you love it,
Mm-hmm.
and you don't expect anything in return. You just see that you enlighten, inspire adults and kids
Right.
to learn,
Mm-hmm.
and that's the most important thing.
Right.
But again, I just want to honor you guys for what you guys do.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
You guys don't often hear it, so I want to just let you know I appreciate what you guys do, because you need to hear it. All teachers need to hear it. Is that usually when you hear positive reinforcements, it keeps you going on that path. That what, even though I'm going through hardship, maybe I want to pivot. Maybe because hearing this make me feel like I'm in the right direction. You know what I mean? And so I just want to appreciate you guys. This has been another great conversation. This is part 3. We got one more episode to go on AI ethics. I hope you guys out there enjoyed the conversation. And then most important, do your research on it. You know what I mean? We just created the baselines for you guys who's listening to just do the research. Because again, there's no one out there in our communities that's having a conversation about AI. There's one person that's probably out there except me that's talking about this. But it's important that we have this conversation and how it impacts us all. So if you like this, subscribe. And also, before we end this, how can people find you? Who wants to go first?
Okay. So you can find me on all social media at Love Built Life.
And for my quest to teach, and we're blogging, we're posting on social media. Even if you Google us on Google or even in AI, Aida Jackson or William Jackson, Jacksonville, Florida.
Yeah.
You know, we're always creating content to share information for the parents, the public, grandparents, because we understand we're parents and grandparents and surrogate parents and involved in the community. So
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah. And honored to be ministers. So we're,
Yes.
you know, in our church, Launch Church Jacks here in Jacksonville, we want to launch people out in their gifts and talents as well.
Definitely. Thank you guys. I appreciate you guys. And this has been another great conversation here on the podcast. Like, subscribe, and all that good stuff. And we're out. Peace. All right. Stay on 1 second. Let me end the recording. And